Hello guys, welcome back. My name is Nathan, and today I'm going to be making my top 10 best Montreal Canadiens prospects right now in 2021. Now, I did an Oilers prospect pool ranking a while back, and the team that you guys requested the most afterwards for me to do was the Montreal Canadiens, and their top 10 is absolutely amazing. Among the best in the league in my opinion, still even to this day, and especially when you count Cole Caufield, there is some great talent right at the very top. But when it comes to the Montreal Canadiens prospect pool, who do I see as the best Habs prospects right now in 2021, and which prospects make today's official top 10? Watch till the end for the entire rankings and the full results, and make sure you hit that subscribe button if you are new. 60% of the people that are watching are not subscribed. If you like hockey, this channel is the place to be. But without further ado, we can now officially get inside the top 10 of the Montreal Canadiens prospect pool, and we're going to start out at number 10, the 10th best prospect for the Habs right now in 2021. This is a guy that's risen a little bit from his draft year, in my opinion. A second rounder back in the 2020 NHL draft, ended up being selected 47th overall. We're going to go on to number 10 and move on to Luke Tuch. To me, Luke Tuch is a very interesting prospect. He's a guy that in his draft year, I thought he had some skill and some good play, but the inconsistencies there were showing, and I don't think he was using his skill as much as he should have, more leaning on the side of the physical play. But now in the NCAA, he's shown more of that for Boston University. This last year, getting 6 goals, 5 assists, 11 points in 16 games played. A lot of that talent, I thought, came from that shot and that scoring ability, and we saw a lot more of that in the NCAA, and I'm really hoping that continues, because if he improves on that and continues to get more consistent, the Habs could have a pretty good middle six player and a middle six scorer in the future. Next up, moving on to number 9 and the 9th best prospect in the Habs prospect pool. This is honestly one of the Habs younger players I'm the most conflicted about, because on some days I can get the argument of him being higher, but I think at number 9 is the sweet spot for this player. We're going to move on to a former second round pick back in the 2017 draft, 56th overall, and move on to the 9th best prospect in Josh Brook. Now, to me, Josh Brook is another guy that's steadily improved, maybe not as much as some people may have hoped maybe a couple years back, but still I think he will be an NHL defenseman and could be still a pretty good one. He's only 22 years old, and he's made some big improvement in the AHL the past couple of years. In 2020, he played 60 AHL games, getting 13 points. This past year, though, got in 33 games, 15 points. So there's been some major offensive improvement there, and I still think there's a lot of rawness to Josh Brook's game, but I think in terms of defensive and overall potential, I still think he can make an NHL lineup and, again, be a pretty good and consistent player. Nothing that'll blow you away, which is why he isn't higher, but still, I think he will be an NHL player eventually for Montreal. Next up at number 8, we're going to go to yet another polarizing Habs prospect to me, a guy that I could see being higher, but hasn't really proved too much since he was drafted. I still like his skill and talent level, but there will still be a lot of progress that needs to be made before he is an NHL player. Going on to another second round pick by the Montreal Canadiens back in 2020, we're going to move on to number 8 and move on to Jan Mysak. Now, to me, Jan Mysak is another guy that I like quite a bit, but again, progress will definitely need to be made in terms of the consistency, in terms of the actual pro level impact. This last season, he played in both the Czech Republic and the AHL. He played in the AHL, getting 22 games played under his belt, 2 goals for 2 points, and had some good games, while others just were inconsistent and didn't seem like he was fully matured yet for the pro game. But he was 18/19 years old, so I can get where he was coming from in that aspect. But I do still think Jan Mysak is a guy that, in terms of shot, in terms of playmaking, in terms of overall offensive abilities, has a lot going for him. But again, some of that size and some of the question marks on consistency kind of hold him back for me personally. But I do still think if Jan Mysak is able to reach that full potential, I could still see him becoming a third, maybe even second line forward if all pans out right. I still think there's a lot of skill there, a lot of talent, and if the Habs are able to fully unlock that offensively, they have a pretty great pick in the second round, which could have been even worth a first round pick if, again, that talent goes the way they want it to. But next up at number 7, we're going to go to a prospect that I still think is at a very high-end level. He's dropped a little bit from last year's ranking, mostly just because of the situation he's in with Montreal. I'm not sure how much of a future he has with the Habs, but we'll see what happens. Going on to number 7, not to get ahead of myself, going on to the 7th best prospect for the Habs, I have Cayden Primeau. Now, to me, Cayden Primeau is another one that's, in terms of his placement in Montreal system, is very, very interesting. This last year played 16 AHL games, getting a .909 save percentage. Not bad whatsoever, but he is 22 years old and starting to get up there in age. I still think there's a lot of talent and potential of Primeau's game, but at the same time, he'll be the backup at best once Jake Allen is gone. But even then, I'm not sure if he'll actually be the starter for the Montreal Canadiens unless Carey Price just falls off a cliff. So his future as a starter in Montreal is kind of muddy right now, but I still think in terms of the skill and the talent level, having two great starters of the future in Price and Primeau is not a bad problem to have. And I do think Primeau will be a good NHL goaltender once the development starts to rapidly increase and once he gets that backup job eventually with the Habs. And you know what? For a 7th round pick, I don't even think the Habs would be too mad if Primeau just becomes a backup and a good one for Carey Price. I mean, for a 7th round pick, that's honestly quite good. But now we're going to move on to number 6 and the 6th best prospect in the Montreal Canadiens system. This is a guy that I've loved really before he was drafted. I loved the fit in Montreal once he was officially drafted, and he had a monster year in the USHL. We're going to move on to another later round pick, 4th rounder in 2020, 124th overall. And next up, I have American prospect of the year in Sean Farrell. Now, to me, Sean Farrell was just brilliant in the USHL this last year, and even though there is still a lot to prove in the pro game, I think we saw some big improvement in his overall game too this last season. I mean, just looking at the points, he was electric. 101 points in 53 USHL games, 72 assists, 29 goals. He was all over the score sheet every single night, and I feel like this guy will be a very interesting prospect to watch in terms of that transition on the pro game. He is a smaller forward. He is a less impactful guy on physical play and defensive play, but I do think in terms of offensive instincts, in terms of consistency, in terms of overall play driving, Sean Farrell is one of the best forwards the Habs will have in the future, and I do think in terms of potential, he could even become a top 6 winger. Again, just like Jan Mysak, if everything pans out. But again, that skill level, that overall transitional ability is fantastic for a player that young. Now, speaking of guys I was big fans of before they were even drafted by the Montreal Canadiens, we're going to move on to number 5 and the 5th best prospect in the Montreal Canadiens system. This is a guy that's risen quite a bit in the past couple of years. Not really too surprising to me. It's been a little bit more surprising for others, but at number 5, I have my boy, Jayden Struble. Now, to me, Jayden Struble is one of the most fascinating prospects in the Habs system. He's had a lot of growth over the past couple of years. At age 20, he was a 2nd round pick, 46th overall back in 2019, and a lot of people saw that as a reach. I saw it as a little bit of a reach, but not that much. In terms of the potential that Struble brought at the time, I mean, looking back at his draft year even, back in 2019, he was playing in the USHS, the US High School League, but I still thought he was a great defenseman and had some great overall skating and offensive instincts, and that would transition pretty nicely onto the NCAA, where in 2020, he got 21 NCAA games, getting 10 points, and then this last year had an even better season overall, getting 18 games played, 2 goals, 10 assists for 12 points, but I think when it comes to Struble, he's been really developing himself, especially the past year, as a much more complete defenseman. But in terms of skating, in terms of transitional ability, and in terms of good overall offensive instincts, this is a guy that brings a lot to the table. And even though there is still some weaknesses to his game on defense and in terms of raw consistency there, I do think Struble will be an NHL defenseman and could even become a pretty good one at that. A lot of good tools, though, for the Montreal Canadiens to work with. But now moving on to number 4, we're starting to get into the 1st round picks here for the Montreal Canadiens, and we're going to go to the 1st round pick back in 2020, 16th overall, and even though at the time I saw it as a major reach, and I still think it was a reach for the Montreal Canadiens, he's proving a lot more of his value even in the short amount of games played he's had. We're going to move on to number 4 and move on to Cayden Guhle. Now, to me, Cayden Guhle is another interesting prospect in terms of my stock on him, because you guys know I wasn't the hugest fan of the pick back in 2020, but I still thought there was some value to be had there, and I mean, Guhle has definitely improved on his overall ability. You saw that in the World Juniors, just how impactful and consistent he was for Team Canada, but that was also true in his short stint in the AHL, and even the 2 games he played in the WHL. It is a shame that we didn't see more of him this last year, but I do think he'll get an even bigger sample size, hopefully, in 2022, but this is a guy that in terms of defense, in terms of physical play, has a lot of great traits, and I think the physical play is also the most important part of his game, because he, in terms of strengths, I think that is his biggest strength, and the offense has taken a little bit of a step forward. I think there has been some improvement, though, in Cayden Guhle's game, and even though I still have some problems with it, his strengths are still pretty impactful, and I think for the Montreal Canadiens, they know how to use that right, and I think he will eventually be a solid contributor on that Habs blue line. But next up, we're going to get inside the top 3 Montreal Canadiens prospects, and at number 3, I have a guy that I've loved for a very long time. This is a guy that I didn't really like too much, or as much as I do now, pre his actual draft, but I do think since then, he's made some major improvements, and I think in terms of his best qualities, he's going to be really good and really well handled in Montreal. We're going to move on to another defensive prospect, this time a 3rd round pick, 71st overall, back in 2018, and I'm going to move on to one of my favorite defensive prospects in the game right now in Jordan Harris. Now, to me, Jordan Harris is just so fun to watch. At age 21, even though he is a little bit shorter at 5'11", I still think his overall game definitely outweighs that con, and in the past couple years in the NCAA, he's been fantastic. In 2020, he got 21 points, 18 assists in 33 games played. This last year, got and was the assistant for Northeastern, got 19 points, 6 goals, 13 assists in 19 games played, 19 points, 19 games played, a point per game in the NCAA, which for a defenseman is pretty hard to do. This next season will likely be in the NCAA again, hasn't officially signed the Montreal Canadiens, which is a little bit worrying, but I do think in terms of the overall potential, Harris is fantastic in skating, in terms of playmaking, in terms of play driving and transitional ability. He's able to get out of his zone super easily and make things look easy too. To me, Harris has a lot of great traits, and I'm really hoping the Montreal Canadiens are able to sign him because I think Harris will be beautiful for the Habs blue line in the future. But the Habs deep prospects just keep on coming and keep on coming. We're going to move on to number 2, the second best Montreal Canadiens prospect right now in 2021. This is another guy that I've liked for a while, not before he was drafted, but once he was drafted, I started to get a lot more attention on him. I started to watch him a lot more, and I started to really get what the hype was about. Next up, we're going to move on to a third-round pick, 64th overall, back in 2019, and coming in at number 2, I have defenseman from Sweden, Mattias Norlinder. Now, to me, Mattias Norlinder is another interesting guy. Could even make the team, or there's at least some talk that he could make the team this next year. I personally think Norlinder should have one more year in the SHL. I think that would be absolutely perfect. And then once he's done with this next year, he can come onto the team and be potentially even a top 4 D-man. I think Norlinder could be a really good, sturdy, offensive and overall defenseman for the Montreal Canadiens. And there's just a lot to like in his game personally. I mean, this last year in the SHL, he was very solid and consistent, getting 37 games played in with 5 goals, 5 assists, and 10 points overall. To me, he's another interesting project for the Habs that has worked out pretty well these past couple of years, but this is a guy that in terms of shot, in terms of playmaking, in terms of overall offensive instincts, in terms of vision as well, he's a guy that can do a lot of different things. I think has a lot going for him too in the future. He's only 21 years old and has already done great in the SHL, and I think the sky is the limit for this player, what he can do with the Habs. I think he could be a top 4 D-man in the future potentially, and could unlock that talent that has always been there. But you know what? Without any more suspense, let's get into the final pick of today's video. The number 1 spot and the best prospect the Montreal Canadiens have to offer. This is a guy that was just elite this last year, and I think has so much potential for the Montreal Canadiens. In my opinion, the 3rd overall pick is going to do great things. Back in 2012, he was just brilliant, and still continues to be. At number 1, I have Alex Skelj. Okay, fine. It's Cole Caufield. Going on to number 1, it is Cole Caufield officially, and there is really no doubt about it. Of course, the 15th overall pick, you guys know I've been a big fan of him for a very long time, and it was an absolute steal at the 2019 NHL draft, and continues to be. And Cole Caufield is, in my opinion, probably at least, even if you put him outside the top 3, I think it would be an understatement, a top 3 prospect right now in the NHL. It's between him, Zegras, and Quinton Byfield, in my opinion, and I feel like Cole Caufield deserves that hype. You saw it in the playoffs this last year, how obviously the size was a big question mark, but he came into the playoffs where it's the most intense physical time of the year, and he absolutely thrived. He wasn't just good, he was great for the Montreal Canadiens, and it was at times one of their best, if not their best offensive producer. This is a guy that absolutely rises to the challenge every single time, and has been great in every single league he's played in. He's gotten better and better every single year too, and I think this is a guy that in terms of the Calder Trophy odds, I think is the most likely guy to win it, though Maurice Suter's close. But when it comes to Cole Caufield, he's going to be an elite goal scorer. He's going to be an elite offensive player. But that mindset, that ability to win is just such a key part of Caufield's game. And I do think he'll carry that winningness onto the Montreal Canadiens and will be the biggest part of their future alongside Nick Suzuki. And will continue to bring that youth and that great skill to the Habs. But that'll be it for today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy, make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and hit that notification bell if you haven't already. Comment down below what you agree and disagree with my top 10, and let me know in the comments down below your top 10. Who do you see as the best Habs prospects in the entire league? Let me know your thoughts. Make sure you share this video with your friends. Get it out there and click on this card up here to watch all my rankings content right in one playlist. If you want to know my actual honorable mentions, I have quite a few. Obviously, Obviously, Ryan Poehling is up there. Oliver Kapanen, Jesse Yalman, Gianni Fairbrother. I think those guys are the best prospects outside of the top 10. Oh, and I do have Riley Kidney at number 11. I forgot to mention that. So he would have been almost tied with Luke Tuck, but those two guys are right there at number 10, number 11. So there you go. The official, I guess, top 15 of the Habs prospects. But that is going to be it for today, guys. Hopefully you have a great day. Drink some water, breathe for your nose, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.